Good morning, Nigeria. I make you welcome. This is Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television from our corporate headquarters in Lagos State, Nigeria. I am Henry Ekweremadu'S. Let's kickstart with our newspapers this morning, and right after that will be our main conversation also for today. Please do well to be part of what we do have a say and what we say. You can find us, reach us when you visit us right here at enterprisetvnews.com. You may equally like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV 7. Today, of course, I'll be doing the newspapers alone, and but most important is to see all that we have going on from our newspapers for today. And we'll start our conversation with the Guardian newspaper for today, just to let us know what is in there. The big story we have is 33 years later, hope dims for safer pipeline supplies of Jet A1 to our airports. And on the top strip of the same newspaper, we have other growing interesting stories here that reps Lord Tinubu's intervention payment of protesting contractors. It's safe to say that last week we saw contractors who disrupted seating at the National Assembly because they were not paid for the renovation of the seat of power, which is the National Assembly. And because of that, both the House of Rep and the senators had to seek for 1 week leave so as to ensure that that was taken care of by the executive arm of government. And we have it here that Bola Ahmed Tinubu had made that possible for the contractors, a very good one. And beside that particular story, we have again court adjourns suit on PDP convention, despite a judge in Oyo stating that the convention could go on in Ibadan. But of course, right now we have the court, of course, had adjourned that again. And this is building up to stating if the PDP has more than enough flesh and muscle to wrestle power of the APC. Of course, it's a developing story, and we'll see how that goes. And we have, still from the Guardian newspaper, EFCC declares ex-governor Silva wanted for alleged fraud. Remember, Silva, the former minister, state for petroleum, was fingered in the coup scare that we had going on in Nigeria to oust President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It's been reported that he was one of the chief financiers of that coup scare, allegedly. And the question Nigerians would ask is that the reason the EFCC is going on him? Of course, it's been stated that they found out a $14 million misappropriation of funds while he was the minister state for petroleum. Well, from that particular story, we have other growing story that WHO declares 24 million living with diabetes in Africa. And of course, Nigeria, the giant of Africa with over 200 million people, start to say that possibly we might, of course, lead that statistics with a large number of people infected with that disease. And from the bottom strip of that same newspaper, which of course is the Guardian newspaper, we have a federal government urges calm as Soyinka northern groups reject Trump's genocide claims. Of course, the federal government under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has no choice right now but to call for calm, because the more those who dissent in voice, that is, continue to talk about these things, I would love to believe it's worsening the situation. It's worsening the diplomatic efforts that the federal government is possibly putting on board to ensure that the rift of the fracas between Nigeria and Donald J. Trump and the United States of America, comes to a lasting end. So I'd love to maybe say congratulations to the federal government for coming in and asking everyone to maybe slow down their temperature on this particular ongoing fracas. And we have equally other matters: fraud, apathy, threatening democracy. Dixon Amechi says, remember the ADC right now started on a very congratulatory height and vibe. Right now, the ADC seems not to hold its back yet again. We've had off-cycle elections twice. ADC fielded candidates, and none of those candidates actually made any way. Of course, with Anambra just had concluded, we had an ADC person who ran for the governor of the state. He didn't score more than some few thousands. One would say if ADC is truly ready to take over power from the APC-led administration. From the Guardian newspaper, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to Daily Trust newspaper. We have the big story here that bandits attack 5 vehicles, abduct passengers in Kogi. Well, this is really not really a good story. It's truly not a good story. And remember, Kogi is like the transit point, you know, between different states. You want to travel from Abuja to any part of the southeast of Nigeria. You want to travel sometime from Lagos to Abuja. You have to go through Kogi State. And if that particular area is not a safe haven for travelers, then how much would it be for tourists who might decide to come to Nigeria? And talking about tourism in Nigeria, with the level of insecurity dealing with Nigeria so bad, do you think anything tourism would be considered at this point in our history? There used to be a time in Nigeria where tourism was one of our mainstay, but today insecurity had really nose-dived the tourism ecosystem in the country. And when stories like this made headlines on our newspapers, it's actually quite disturbing, if you would agree with me on that particular fact. We have below that particular big story, federal government pushes for Ekweremadu'S transfer to Nigeria. And on the top strip of the same newspaper, we have the growing matter. Abuja hospital mortuary drowns in stench and decay. I do not know if the FCT minister, Yusuf, is well aware of this very despicable situation. FCT is the Federal Capital Territory for a reason. And if the tertiary hospital we have there is going through this big issue, then it is a cause for serious concern, because the health and wealth of Nigerians is very paramount at this point. And if our tertiary hospital do not have all that it should have to ensure that the deceased are taken care of, then it's a growing problem that I think we should take care of most well. But let's take another story from the Daily Trust newspaper. Obasanjo, under my watch, US wouldn't do anything in Africa without knowledge. Safe to say, we must give it to President Olusegun Obasanjo. Between 1999 and 2007, he led Africa like a president would lead a continent. Everything that happened in Africa between that period in time, Olusegun Obasanjo was well aware. Remember, he went to disrupt the incursion in Gambia, you know, with our federal troops, the same troops that are going through so much in the hands of bandits and can't even win the war. There used to be a time when Nigeria was ahead of the curve during President Olusegun Obasanjo, and that's what he is stating here, that during his time in office, that U.S. wouldn't do anything in Africa without his knowledge. Can we say that for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu? And this a growing matter, and this speaks to the importance of symbolism and how mighty it could be from different fronts and from different individuals. And we have on the bottom strip of the same newspaper, many killed as Boko Haram, ISWAP clash in Lake Chad region. I wish my editor would love to play the video, the viral video of these two insurgent groups battling amongst themselves, leaving lots of people dead. And while all of this happened in our territory, a security operative, the DSS, the Nigerian police, the military, I love to believe, sat down allegedly like spectators watching everything that was going on between these two insurgent groups. Looking at the threat posed upon us by the United States of America, this would have been an opportunity for the Nigerian military to show its might, to declare and prove to Donald Trump that yes, we are ahead of the curve and we have everything all rounded up. But if this could happen in our territory and it's all over the social media platform without any iota of our security architecture being ahead of this and ensuring that this was nipped in the bud, then I think it's a growing source of concern that those in authority should have to, you know, really take into cognizance at this point. From the Daily Trust newspaper, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the Punch. And also we have the big story, Trump's threat. Troops pound terror bases in key states. Remember, I do not know which of the key states here. Of course, okay, so we have it here. They said 86 rescued in air ground assault in Borno, Kwara, Katsina. Boko Haram ISWAP clash leaves 50 dead. So I do not know the place of our security in ensuring that all of this were taken care of, because the much that we saw from social media, especially going by the viral video of Boko Haram and ISWAP insurgents and bandits taking on themselves, there were no sign of our security, coming to round these people up. They were going in all force and were really in charge of that territory, the Lake Chad Basin and region of Nigeria. This is actually quite disturbing, and I think it's an opportunity for our security to really move ahead of these people and ensure that both, especially, kinetic measures were taken in to ensure that they are totally taken out of our space in Nigeria. On the top strip, we have a presidency eyes NNPC shake up as all output falters. Yet again, I do not know the place of the presidency. I would love to believe the NNPC Limited has been sold, it's privatized. And lots of Nigerians have questioned why the federal government still wants a bite of what has been privatized, which shows that the reason we have lots of issues with our oil ecosystem in Nigeria is simply because of the deliberate effort of the federal government to keep the incursion going on in that particular ecosystem. I would love to believe if it is privatized, wholly privatized, then it should be allowed to be there, and so NNPC can compete rather than one time or another, having the presidency and those in authority have a say in that ecosystem. Over 100,000 policemen assigned to VIPs in Nigeria. We have a total of about 400 to 500 military personnel, police that is, in Nigeria. And if over 100 are assigned to VIPs, how many is left to take care of Nigerians? Remember, we're a population of about 200 million people. So do the maths, and you will see how bad the situation is. If over 100,000 are assigned to VIPs, and most of these VIPs, lots of people have argued, are some of the biggest issues that we have in Nigeria. So if those, to some extent, who have contributed to the problems that we have are properly taken care of, are secured by our police force, then it means that there's a growing source for concern here. Over 100,000 of Nigerian military personnel taking care of our VIPs. It's actually a very sad situation here. And below that story, or below the top story or the big story, Tinubu pushes Siemens a deal for fresh 4,000 megawatts of power. I just hope that this pulls through so that the value of a generation in Nigeria, will be delivered for our use. I love to believe this will go down in helping Nigerians acquire better power in Nigeria. Well, this is what we have from the Punch newspaper. And let me just do one more story from the Vanguard also. We have the big story: insecurity. NAF strikes to kill terrorists, the bandits in Borno, Kwara, Katsina, and others. On the top strip, 2027, Reagan, worst coup. That's coming from Dixon Amechi. I do not know what their statement means at this point, especially going by what happened in Anambra, the vote buying, excessive nature of that. And of course, these two gentlemen are saying that if 2027 is rigged, then that would be the biggest, largest, worst coup ever in our democracy. Well, that's all we can take for now from our newspapers, and I'd love to believe that you enjoyed every bit of that story, and just like we have right here on Enterprise Television. And from here, we'll be moving on to our main conversation in a bit. That is when we return. Tinubu reportedly sent high-powered delegation to the UK for Ekweremadu'S case. That in a bit. Still Enterprise Morning. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Being back, and if you just joined us, this is still Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television. Let's head to our main conversation for today. But of course, this is more like a food for thought and a sit-down conversation on what other nations might see as a hilarious, but in Nigeria, a hilarious situation that is. But in Nigeria, this is amongst the reasons we as a people can't seem to maybe understand the nature of our many multifaceted issues. Now let's get into the story and see what we have here. Let's start the story like this. In Nigeria, that is, where the drums of power beat louder than the cries of the people. Now, this is a story often we would love to begin the same way, with a man who has fallen and other men who pretend to mourn his fall. But once again, the eyes of the world have turned towards our country. Senator Ekweremadu, a man who once sat in the red chambers of Abuja, now sits in a foreign cell, not for his service to the people of his constituency, but for the sin of turning another man's body into a field of harvest. In the cold court of London, justice took a form that our own soil has long forgotten. It was said that Ekweremadu, his wife Beatrice, and their accomplice, a doctor named Obinna, conspired to bring a young man from the streets of Lagos to the United Kingdom. His body was to be carved for parts, a kidney for their ailing daughter. But fate, that old tricksters turned against them this way, the matter came before British law, and the gavel fell without respect for title or tribe. The senator was given 9 years and 8 months, his wife Beatrice 4 years and 6 months, and the doctor Obinna was given 10. And so the mighty man became a prisoner, that's Ekweremadu, not in the dungeon of Enugu or Kuje prison, but under the cold watch of a foreign warden. Now comes the curious part, ladies and gentlemen. In a move that has stirred both laughter and sometimes lamentation across Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the man who promised renewed hope, has sent a high-powered delegation to London. It's important to note here, Nigerians, and both at home and those in the diaspora, that the high-powered delegation sent by Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not go to London to seek trade deals, which we badly need in Nigeria, nor to return our stolen artifacts, or to speak for the countless Nigerians stranded in foreign prisons. No. They went instead to ask that Senator Ekweremadu, the same man convicted by a court of conscience, be granted clemency and perhaps have him returned home to Nigeria. A chieftain of the ruling party, the APC, proud as a peacock, announced it online in London when they arrived that our foreign minister, our attorney general, and other dignitaries had arrived in the United Kingdom to plead for Ekweremadu's release. And Nigerians, weary of their endless drama, asked quietly amongst themselves, for what purpose exactly? Now let's get to the gist of the story. Was it justice or brotherhood, patriotism or politics? For in this same land, another man, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, languishing in detention, his fate tied not to a foreign court, but to the whims of those who sent this delegation abroad to the UK. Now, if mercy were the president's trade, would he not begin at home where his word is law? Alas, this is Nigeria. Lots of people would conclude, a land where thieves are mourned and truth-tellers are scorned, where the hand that steals is covered in perfume, and one that points, yes, at that thief is cut off eventually, despicably. We have become a people who pity the powerful when they stumble, but mock the poor when they fall. The white man's court has done what ours have long forgotten. Yes, that is the truth. It has shown that no man, no matter how exalted, is above the law, which is sacrosanct. Yet our leaders in Nigeria, instead of learning the hard lessons, now go begging for the return of a fallen comrade. Not because this will drive our GDP in Nigeria. Let me repeat that again. Not because this will drive our GDP upward in Nigeria or help guarantee safety for Nigerians plunged in insecurity, with people not being able to go to their farms. But all of this is because his humiliation abroad stinks their pride at home, right here in our country. We have seen this dance before, over and over again. When a tree falls in the forest, the termites gather, not to mourn, but to feast. If President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's delegation succeeds, what lesson exactly will remain for the youths who still believe that integrity matters? What message will echo across the land? That crime is forgivable if one's friends sit in high places? That power, for example, once lost can be reclaimed by protocol and persuasion? Now, there is a saying in my village that when a gourd breaks, you may gather the fragments, but it will never hold water again. Ekweremadu'S gourd, or his pot, is broken, and all the king's men cannot mend it. That is the fact, as much as we deceive ourselves. What remains is the shame of a nation that shields the powerful from the consequences of their own deeds. Someday, perhaps, yes, someday, Nigeria will, of course, tire of his rickety wagon of hypocrisy. Someday, yes, maybe someday, our leaders will learn that justice cannot be bartered like palm oil in the marketplace. But until then, the story continues. The same old story told in new tongues of a country forever forgiven its masters and never, unfortunately, forgiven itself. That's what we have today on our main conversation. I believe this would be a food for thought for us, that we need to save Nigeria.